The wind swept along the highway, carrying the smell of hot metal and scorched dust, the familiar scent whenever a mistake weighing tens of thousands of pounds had just happened. In front of me, giant masses of steel lay silent, but the pressure they created was anything but still. Every inch out of line, every degree leaning downward, could turn a recovery into a second disaster. The cables tightened in silence, the cranes stretched upward like giant arms, and one single decision had to be made at exactly the right moment. We arrived at the first scene just as the sun reached its peak. A tractor hauling a 40-foot container lay tipped beside the median barrier, its steel body pressed into the pavement like a lifeless mass, yet inside it held tens of thousands of pounds of cargo. We inspected the condition of the container and the position of the locking point. Then we decided to use a system of steel cables, chains, and specialized cranes to upright the container without causing further damage to the load inside. Steel lines and chains were threaded through the frame. The system was built around 2 rotators, each capable of generating more than 60,000, 75,000 pounds of pulling force. But the real challenge was never strength, it was how to use that strength.
Put that and go down with the cable at the same time. You got tension? Yeah, I have a little bit up in the air.
When the pull began, there was a small movement, almost invisible. But I knew that was the sign the center of gravity had started to shift. Once the body was clear of the pavement, we slowly adjusted the pulling angle. The lean changed little by little, 5 degrees, then 10 degrees. Like rotating a giant steel mass around an invisible axis. One rotator continued carrying the main lift, while the other shifted into guidance, pulling slightly off-center to bring the center of gravity back onto the true vertical line. That was the tense moment, when the container hung in the air, neither upright nor falling.
Woohoo! Bust that, baby!
Thick wooden mats were placed beneath the wheel landing zone, not only to support the load, but to absorb impact as it touched down, preventing direct shock to the chassis. And after all of it, we returned the truck intact. No breaking glass, no added damage.
Alex's footage came out cool, and then my perspective of the flip.
Not long after finishing the first recovery, just as we had a moment to rest, a new call came in. The second job was a tractor hauling corn, overturned on a hillside, the trailer twisted like metal bent beyond its limit. Cables and chains were attached to the chassis frame, not to the trailer body, which had already deformed. Because the truck was heavily loaded and rolled hard, the trailer had suffered severe torsional twist. We had to coordinate multiple cable lines to keep balance during the lift. The rotator was deployed, boom extended nearly 30 feet. Initial pulling force reached around 40,000 pounds. The tractor rose, but the trailer did not follow. It resisted. We had to add a restraining line on the opposite side, creating an artificial balance point, keeping the truck from rotating out of line during the lift. The pulling angle was adjusted constantly, 5 degrees at a time. There was no room for error. The second attempt distributed force more evenly, around 55,000 pounds, but far more stable. The truck slowly stood up, like an injured body forcing itself back to its feet. And then, bang, the truck hit the ground again. Not violently, but enough to trigger the entire load inside. Corn surged upward like a compressed wave, shaken by inertia, then spilled through gaps where the body had already been deformed. But we did not stop there. A main cable line was connected to a reinforced point at the front of the chassis, with a rear restraining line added to control rotation. Pulling force was applied slowly. The tractor moved foot by foot, dragging the entire body as it gradually turned into the open lane. When the axle lined up with the roadway, we reduced force and secured the system. Only then had the truck truly returned, not perfect but safe enough to move. You cannot always solve a problem by pulling harder. When the load inside is still alive, still shifting, victory does not belong to the strongest force, but to the one who understands how it moves.
Espera del próximo llamado de emergencia.
We continued the journey with a nighttime recovery. Headlights cut through the darkness, revealing a sugarcane truck completely overturned. Around 88,000 pounds of cane still remained inside the trailer. The instruction was clear: upright the truck without unloading the cargo. I knew that meant stepping into the danger zone. 2 rotators were deployed. Their combined theoretical pulling force could exceed 120,000 pounds. It sounded like enough, but reality is never as simple as numbers. The chain hook points became the weakest factor. The sloped trailer body was not fully rigid with the frame, which meant pulling force could not transfer evenly. We tried the first attempt. The cables tightened, metal screamed, the truck did not move. Only the winching system began to suffer under pressure. We added more cable points and adjusted the pulling angle from Misael's crane. Second attempt. Force increased, but the result did not change. Not because we were not strong enough, but because the combined weight and structural condition had exceeded the capacity of every load-bearing point. In that moment, I understood. Continuing was no longer courage, it was recklessness. The decision was made. Unload the cargo. Not a failure. The only choice that kept people and equipment safe. Some limits cannot be overcome by willpower. Knowing when to stop is not weakness. It is the highest form of professionalism. In recovery work, the right decision is not always the next action. Sometimes it is knowing not to act. 3 situations, 3 different choices, but all shared the same moment. A decision made under the pressure of tens of thousands of pounds. Strength does not always win. Only precision and composure keep everything from slipping beyond control. If you want to see more breathless recoveries and the real lessons behind each decision, don't forget to like and subscribe so you won't miss the next exciting videos.